everyone. My name is Jessica Jimenez, and today my presentation is about Chapter 5.2.1 from A Gift of Fire, Social, Legal, and Ethical Issues for Computing Technology by Sarah Bates. And the chapter is called, What is Hacking? Okay, so the overview of today's presentation is, in this section we'll talk about what is hacking and what it truly means with various examples of the hacking that has been done. The issue is hackers, and we'll be discussing why hacking is a problem, an issue, and what kind of problems it brings about, and what can be a good solution to resolve the issue based on what the textbook has presented, if it has suggested anything, and also what can the future look like with hackers still doing the hacking. So here we'll start off with hackers. When everyone hears hackers, what do people usually think? Well, they think irresponsible, disruptive criminals, and they break into computer systems. Intentionally, they release computer viruses. They tend to steal sensitive personal, business, and government information. When you think hackers, you think they steal money, crash websites, destroy files, and disrupt businesses. So there is tons of negative stereotypes tied into hackers. And here we'll be discussing what does hackers actually mean and what do they do. But to discuss what hacking is, we have to break it down into 3 phases. There is phase 1, which is the early years, 1960s and 1970s, when hacking was actually positive, it was a good thing. And then there's phase 2 from the 1970s to the 1990s, and that's when hacking took a turn and became more negative. By phase 3, that's the beginning of the mid-1990s. That's with the growth of the web, where the internet literally went globally and part of our everyday lives, and e-commerce and the participation of a large portion of the general public online. So let's start discussing phase 1, which is the joy of programming. This is a very short section. In the early days of computing, a hacker was a creative programmer who wrote very elegant or clever programs. So hackers were good, and a good hack was an especially clever piece of code. Hackers were computer victorious, and these hackers, they created many of the first computer games and operating systems. Many of these hackers were high school and college students or dropouts. So in the beginning, hacking was mainly for games, and it started the development of computing. So now we are heading on to phase 2, and that's from the 1970s to the mid-1990s. So here, during this time period, a hacker was known as someone who breaks into computers for which the hacker does not have authorized access, and that's still pretty much the definition to today. By the 1980s, hacking also included spreading computer viruses, but this was mostly done in software traded on floppy disks. So hacking behavior included pranks and thefts of information, software, and sometimes money. It also included phone phreaking, which is manipulating the telephone system. And hackers obtain passwords by sophisticated techniques and by social engineering, such as fooling people into disclosing the information. Okay, and we're still going to continue to talk about phase 2. During this phase, a program known as the Internet Worm demonstrated the vulnerability of the Internet as a whole in 1988. So this is one of the examples as that happened during this time period. A graduate student at Cornell University wrote the worm and released it onto the internet. This worm did not destroy files or steal passwords, though. There is still disagreement on whether the creator intended or expected it to cause the degree of disruption that it did. This worm spread very quickly to computers running particular versions of the UNIX operating system and jamming them up and preventing normal processing. The worm affected a few thousand computers, which was pretty big portion of the internet at that time. And the worm disrupted work and inconvenienced a large number of people. Okay, now we're heading on to phase 3, and that is the growth of the web and mobile devices. We know that the web has spread globally. All over around the world there is internet. And with that came hacking. So about roughly in the mid-1990s, the increased use of internet for email and other communications for sensitive information and for economic transactions made hacking more dangerous. So a lot of sensitive information was stored on the internet. The risk increased with basic infrastructure systems such as water and power, hospitals, transportation, emergency services, and telephone systems accessible on the net. And hacking was also used for political motives. So continuing phase 3, I'm going to provide some examples of hacking. Some of them can be seen as pranks and others are serious disruptions. So here's some examples. Pranksters modified the U.S. Department of Justice webpage to read Department of Injustice in protest of the Communications Decency Act. Also, hackers changed the CIA's site to read Central Stupidity Agency and added links to pornography sites. A teenager crippled a computer system that handled communications between the airport tower and incoming planes at a small airport. And now an example of a serious disruption is in 2000, the love bug or I love you virus spread around the world in a few hours. It destroyed images and music files, modified a computer's operating system and internet browser, and collected passwords. This virus infected major corporations like Ford and Siemens and 80% of U.S. federal agencies, including the State Department and the Pentagon, along with members of the British Parliament and the U.S. Congress. So you can see there is some hacking that was done for pranks and some that caused serious damage. Continuing phase 3, we're going to talk more of examples of hacking. And one example of hacking is denial of service attacks, which shut down almost a dozen major websites, some for several hours. The victims included Yahoo, eBay, Amazon, E-Trade, Byte.com, CNN, and others. In this kind of act, denial of service, hackers overload the target site with hundreds of thousands of requests for web pages and other information. Programs planted on numerous other systems, many at universities to disguise their origin, generate the requests. Investigators traced the attack to a 15-year-old Canadian who used the name Mafia Boy. He pleaded guilty to a long list of charges. The U.S. government estimated the cost of this incident at $1.7 billion. Again, hacking can be very dangerous. And one last example for phase 3. Phase 3 includes tons of examples of hacking since it is in modern technology. So the example is Sony sued George Hotz in 2011 for showing how to run unauthorized applications and games on Sony's PlayStation 3. To revolt, a hacker group launched a denial of service attack on Sony, just how we mentioned. This accessed names, birthdays, and credit card information of millions of users of Sony's gaming system. So now that I have provided tons of examples of hacking and how it's looked throughout the years and what it has done. We can discuss, is hacking harmless? Well, when a system administrator for a computer system at a university, a website, a business, or the military detects an intruder, he or she cannot immediately distinguish a non-malicious hacker from a thief, terrorist, or spy. Uncertainty about the intruder's intent and activities has additional costs for systems that contain sensitive data. So, according to the head of the computer crime unit at the Department of Justice, after a hacker accesses a Boeing Corporation computer, apparently just to hop to another system, Boeing spent a large sum to verify the intruders changed no files. Continuing, is hacking harmless? If system administrators detect unauthorized access in a medical record system, a credit database, or payroll data, they must stop the intruders and determine whether they copied or changed any records. Uncertainty causes harm or expense, even if hackers have no destructive intent. So no matter who the hacker is or what the intent was, a company has to take extra caution and review everything just in case some information was stolen or something was changed. So we have discussed everything of what is a hacker and examples of what have they done. Now to summarize this presentation, hacking has changed over the span of time. At the beginning it was harmless and for fun, they were seen as good, but by today any sort of hacking can be harmful. Not all hackers are criminals. Some just want to beat the newest game out there or unlock every feature. But any company will react to a hacker with extreme caution. Almost all hacking is a form of trespass, and hackers with non-malicious intention should not be surprised that others will often not view them kindly. Okay, and we'll go back to the key points. What is the issue here? Hackers. And why will be a problem issue? Hackers steal sensitive personal information, causing companies and individuals to lose great amounts of money. And what can be a good solution to resolve the issue based on what the textbook presented? There was no solution presented here. What can be a future issue related to this issue? Hackers. Hacking is becoming a greater problem as the internet expands and all information is stored there. And here are the references. I used the textbook A Gift of Fire, Social, Legal, and Ethical Issues for Computing Technology by Sarah Bass. And you can find this from pages 230 to 235. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.